everybody. We are in Matthew chapter 5, verse 17. We're going to go 17 through 20. And this is Christ came to fulfill the law. So the next section is just that. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I use the ESV Study Bible. That's the version I use. So do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot, will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. And there are a couple things about this that I think that people misinterpret. People equate religious people, all religious people, with the scribes and Pharisees in this. And this is something that I've heard atheists say and other non-believers is, well, I've got to be holier than you if I even want to be in the kingdom at all. And what's interesting is the scribes and the Pharisees here stand for people who Jesus actually talks about later on in a specific tone. Like he's actually saying specific things about them. And the whole point is that they're missing the point of the law. Not that their actions are fulfilling the law or that blindly trying to fulfill the law is good or following the letter of the law but not the intent is good. But Jesus is saying, I have come, do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. The law or the prophets would have been a way of talking about the Old Testament. So he's saying, I have not come to abolish that, but to fulfill it. And Matthew makes numerous references in the book of Matthew to just that, to Jesus fulfilling that. So he says, therefore, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Or teaches them. So the people that get at the intent of the law, and the intent of the law derives from God's ordered creation from Genesis. And I think that there's a thread that we miss a lot of times where we say Genesis is this creation story, and we kind of minimize the impact it had. But Genesis is not just the creation story, but the entire blueprint for God's ordered creation, male and female, sexuality, marriage, our responsibilities to steward the planet. All of these things derive from Genesis. And one of the most important things that we derive in Genesis is our identity in God. So this idea of us having an identity under God as God's children is directly attributed to this idea of Genesis and creation there. So this is a common theme. I have not come to abolish the law. This is a common theme in Paul's letters. Paul talks about this a lot. In Paul's day, there were a lot of people who were antinomialists, who practiced antinomialism, which means like lawlessness. They believed that Jesus came and did away with the law so they could live however they wanted and there were no consequences. There's no rules, right? People thought you could just believe in Jesus and act however you want, and that the law no longer mattered. And that is simply not the case. Jesus himself says that it does matter. Paul reiterates that people that preach lawlessness or a separation of the Old Testament and the New Testament are not of God. In fact, that's a big driver in his talks about who is a false teacher or not. In verse 19, whoever relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least. So this idea of some people getting it more right than others, and that this kind of tiered justice thing is also kind of present here, which I thought was interesting. But just a little section here. But I think it's very important because this one section refutes 90% of theology that I see in big evangelical churches and a lot of false teachers right now. There are just so many people that in some way, shape, or form are negating God's law or the consequences of law. And I think that this verse has something very specific to say about that. So it also, I think, highlights how we should dig into the Old Testament and understand the law, and then look at what Jesus is saying about it and what he says about the intent of the law. I think that that's another little point here. So that's what I had for this section. And like I said, like and subscribe if you want to catch all these videos as they come out, and we'll jump over into the next section. All right, peace.